Hey guys, so welcome back to the seventh episode of the Teen Whisperer Show. And today we have a guest who is supposed to be on the podcast a long time ago, but due to my ignorance, I couldn't do that. He's a consultant slash producer in the podcast consultant, where they help you from start to finish in podcasting for your big brand and your branding and sales to the next level. And he also worked in the Wall Street Journal, which is kind of really cool when someone says that. So guys, without further ado, let me introduce you to Mr. Mathew. So Mr. Mathew, welcome to the show. Please tell a little bit about yourself and your podcasting career.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. So yeah, like you said, I actually got my start in radio. It started even before the Wall Street Journal. I was working for a large talk radio station in New Jersey, and while I was there was when the iPhone first came out and the podcast store first opened. People were podcasting, but it really hadn't hit mainstream because it was kind of a difficult process. But once that came out, it seemed like this was going to be a cool thing, and so I turned to my boss and I said, hey, we should turn our content into a podcast. And he said, as long as it doesn't cost me money and I don't have to do any more work, sure, go for it, launch a podcast. So I did just that. I repackaged some of our content and put it as a podcast, and then was there for a little bit longer, and then went to work for the Wall Street Journal. They had a radio network, and my job there was 50% radio and then 50% podcasting. So really hosting, editing, launching, producing, and creating podcasts for the Wall Street Journal. Was there through 2014 when, at the end of 2014, Dow Jones decided to get out of the radio business, and at the same time, they just cut everybody in the audio department. So they got out of radio and they got out of podcasting temporarily, and I found myself without a job in early 2015 and was trying to figure out what my next move was applying for jobs, trying to look for a full-time gig. And while that was happening, people that I used to work with at the Journal that I used to interview regularly kept asking me, hey, can you help us do a podcast, right? We enjoyed doing them. It was good marketing for us. And I said, sure, I can figure that out. Why not? And so I started to just do a little bit of side work, helping people with podcasts, and slowly I kept helping more and more friends and more connections, and as podcasting was getting more popular, my business was just growing and growing. And sure enough, fast forward to today, this is a full-time job. I've got about a half a dozen people that work with me to help produce and clean up and edit podcasts, and we've helped well over 100 podcasters in various capacities. Probably have about 50 active clients right now at different levels of regular publication. I've consulted with some large brands, both on their own podcasts as well as on podcasting strategy as a whole, and continue to love working in the space and seeing what else we can do with it.
Wow. I mean, the fact that you still have clients is really making me jealous. Really, is that people losing many clients and services these days, but still, I mean, I can see how amazing your services must be in order to still have the clients with you. So that's totally awesome. And there's one interesting observation from you. Said that when your boss said it shouldn't cost me any more money or work, how did you actually do that? Did you actually without any cost or anything, do you start it, or is there anything that happened?
Well, so when he said that, what he was basically implying was that he didn't want to hire anybody new, and he didn't want to, put a lot into the budget. So luckily, we had an IT person on staff who quickly understood what podcasting was, how it worked. He was able to help us create RSS feed. And at the time, Libsyn and some of the other companies might have been around, but we did this totally on our own. He created his own RSS script. And I actually had to go in there every day we had a new episode and essentially update the RSS feed manually, right? Typing in the code, adding the title, description, the date, linking to the media file that was hosted on the company servers. So it was kind of done on a shoestring. I mean, a lot of podcasters still do it that way, but it's not as easy as today where you just sign up for a good service and then it gets done for you. So, and the other thing too was that I was able to do it as part of my regular responsibilities, right? I didn't have to, add more time or take away. It was just part of, new things that I was able to do and to implement. And so, the fact that I could add this without disrupting our regular workflow was why I think he was okay with it. And to be honest, last check, that podcast is still going to this day. Now, I'm sure the back end has changed considerably, but I mean, it's a great product. If you live in the state, it takes what they call their first news half hour, this half hour block of news that went out at 5 a.m. every day. We stripped the commercials and the weather and the stuff that wasn't, that's timely and doesn't make sense, and just shrink it down to a real nice, quick, concise hit of the big major stories that affect the area. So, it was just a way to get involved and see what we can do.
Wow, that's totally amazing. And you become a podcast consultant, slash kind of expert. So how do you actually suggest one, to become like that? Because I know people who have been, doing podcast for a year and so, and they are now taking it to the next level, saying that let's do podcast consulting or create courses, talk about podcast and stuff. So is there actually a time frame for it, like a qualification, like you should do this amount of podcast in order to make sure that you become a consultant or anything like that? So what is actually the qualification in order to become like that?
I think, like you said, anybody can really call themselves a consultant. Anybody can call themselves a producer. I think what really helped me stand out from other folks that were saying this was I had been doing it for so long. At the time that I had started my business, I had already just started the business, right? This was just when I started to get those few early clients. I mean, it was still called M. Passy Productions, right? The moniker, the podcast consultant, didn't come along for another couple of years. But what really gave me the confidence to do this was that I had been doing it for so long in so many different capacities, right? I had launched that first one at the radio station. I had hosted and produced and created dozens of different shows with the Wall Street Journal with various levels of success. I had helped several individuals and brands do their own podcasts. And so what really, I think, gives me the credibility to say that I'm a consultant, and this is really, really important, is it's not just knowing what to do, it's knowing what not to do, right? What I always tell people is I've made all the mistakes so you don't have to. And so I'm always a little leery of folks who become a consultant, become a guru, become an expert of some sort on something when they're basically still reading the book. I've seen a lot of people come along and basically, they're reading the book on Podcasting 101. They're offering advice on chapter 1 through 3, and they're just reading chapter 4, right? Like I didn't feel comfortable taking that moniker until I'd gone through the entire book, maybe a few times, made a lot of mistakes, and could execute on those mistakes. I think the other thing that helped me too was along the way, I had done a lot of other gigs related to it. So I ran a podcasting newsletter for a while called Pod to Pod, which we used to news and put out resources and interview a lot of folks. So I was always, I had my thumb on the pulse of the podcasting industry at all times. I had attended a lot of conferences. I had gone to a lot of educational sessions. I had spoken on podcasting in my experience. And so I think it really takes time to be able to just call yourself a consultant. I mean, sure, anybody can claim the moniker, but I think it becomes pretty clear when you're working with clients whether or not you've earned it by how much confidence you have and how you respond to, any problems that come up along the way.
Yeah, and you were talking about like mistakes, like it actually helps us to find out what not to do. So in my case, like I do video editing and kind of audio production with a team member of mine, and if some mistake comes up, it's actually possible for us to redo that. Mostly because we have the tons of project files, and it won't be a really long video in order to do that editing and stuff. But in your case, in podcasting, I mean, like if people are recording like 2.5 hours of podcast or 1.5 hours of podcast, and you did a mistake and you are knowing what to do, what not to do. How do you actually convince or kind of like escape from the fact that I did a mistake, okay, let me correct it. Because most of the time clients would say that you did a mistake, what can I do, I don't trust you anymore with my podcast and all. So how do you actually escape from that? So is there any take on that?
It's a really great question. And especially now in the times that we are living in, I think what we have all come to realize is that it's really easy to forget how brands, how professionals, like how people treat you when times are good. And I think what always sticks with us is how people treat you when times are bad. And so I did a couple of things with this business to help solidify, my reputation and my relationship with my clients. One is I never did a long-term contract. My whole, spiel with my clients is you assign the work, I do the work, I send the invoice, and if you're happy, we do it again. meaning I have to perform every single time. Me and my team have to get it right every single time, because if we don't, people are free to leave whenever they want. So the onus stays on us to really do a good job and to really put in the extra work. But what's more important is that when we make a mistake, because look, nobody is perfect. We have made plenty of mistakes, still learning every single day. You know, even myself, I've been working with Adobe Audition as an editing software for over 10 years. And just the other day, someone who I was training taught me something I didn't know. So I'm always learning. But what's really important is that when a mistake is made, we own up to it. We apologize. We are humbled by our mistakes, and we look to fix it as quickly as possible. So, you know, if I get an email from a client at 5:30 in the morning, usually I'm up at about 6:30 because that's what time my kids wake up. And so the first thing I will do is go downstairs, get on my computer, and fix that mistake. And 9 times out of 10, thankfully, my clients, they don't yell, they don't get angry. They say, thank you for handling it so quickly, right? Because I've shown them how much I care, because this product is not just a podcast, it's a reflection of their brand. As well, there have been times where things have really been bad, and I've just had to stop what I'm doing, put in the work, and, you know, I remember a time where an episode came out and just, it wasn't good. I had assigned it to someone who was a little bit raw, who probably shouldn't have been doing it, and when the client heard it, they said, we can't do this. Instead of saying, well, that's what we're going to run with, I stayed up till 3 in the morning that night, and I fixed it, and I got them a new episode the next day, and they appreciated that. So, you know, everybody is going to make mistakes, and anybody can make a mistake. It's how you take care of those mistakes and how you treat the client when they do. So that's my advice, all right? Like, you should aim to be good. You should aim to be great, but what you really have to do is own up to it and take care of problems when they arise, because that's what people are going to remember.
Yeah. I mean, like, I have a, the video editor client. It's actually, when you're talking that, you won't take, like, long-term clients. I have one long-term client, like, 2 to 3 months of, they have booked me in advance, and they will be like, just do this. No matter the mistakes, because there was a time when I was adding the subtitles to it, it was adequate size. That's what the word was. What I wrote was etiquette signs. It was actually in bold, in subtitles. It was in bold, and I was like, I'm so sorry, I just changed it. Just let me know. I said, no, it's okay, no problem, because she's actually from North India. I'm from South India, so the accent there is kind of really hard to capture in order to do that. So even in this script itself, is actually said it like, I mean, like, even if a software is saying like that, I mean, I'm a human, I can't do much about that. So yeah, I think you were saying that 9 out of 10 clients won't yell and all, but the one client will be there in order to do that stuff. So how do you find out that this is not my ideal client? Because sometimes the vibe doesn't set right. Because even though our visions, because I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek, he's an organization consultant, and he always says that say yes only to those clients who actually you get the vibe right, your mission and vision right. So how do you actually find out that this person is not right for my as a client for podcasting or any further stuff matters?
You'll know really early on. If you see an email pop up, and as soon as you see who the sender is, instead of thinking, ooh, more work, you think, that's probably not the right client for you. And it's tough. When you are starting out, it is tough to say no. And I'm even guilty of it today. Sometimes I will say yes to any project. I will take on the challenge. I will try and take it on. But you know what? You have to be able to say no from time to time, because if you are taking on work that you shouldn't take on, if you are taking on more work than you can handle, if you are working with a client that you just don't jive with, you're not going to do a good job. It's going to put you in a bad mindset, and it's going to impact your work for everybody else. And so you just have to know in your gut, in your soul, that when this person emails, calls, texts, writes, posts an episode, like, if the work just doesn't feel good, if you feel like every time that comes through that it's a bad sensation, it's okay to walk away. It's okay. I mean, you don't want to be a jerk about it either, right? Like, I don't think you do yourself or anybody else any good by, cursing the person out or being mean about it. Be a professional. and just simply say, I don't think this relationship is going to work
Yeah.
out. In the few cases that I didn't think I was a fit for the client anymore, I even offered to help them find somebody else, because at the end of the day, even though I wasn't working with that person, I still wanted my reputation to be as a professional. So I would say, look, we're just not the right solution for you anymore, but let me help you find someone who is. And we've parted ways amicably, which, is the best thing to do. And you know what? If you don't part amicably, if the person doesn't like that you want to quit, if they don't like that you don't want to work together, or whatever it is, and they're going to be angry and mean and all those things about it, you just got to let it go. There's plenty of potential business and potential clients out there for you.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, like, people have to take this point, because mostly, like, that's one of the things that I was supposed to do. And then after that, when I got my clients, I said that it's not like it's not right for me, but right now I can't take this. So I hope you find someone else. I just end it. So kind of type like 2 to 3 paragraphs, like, I'm doing this. So because of that, so it's one person actually from Fiverr contacted me, and I said this, and he said, thanks for the very good explanation. Good luck with what you're doing. So it kind of also feels good, when someone, like, okay, he says that, and that's a kind of a really big thing. And coming on this general news, I actually, it kind of happened like days ago, like that Joe Rogan signing on Spotify for $100 million, the deal. And so I was actually yesterday watching a video of Pat Flynn. He was saying that because of him signing on to Spotify, on leaving YouTube and all the other hosting platforms, he said that small podcasters and podcasters who was below his level, and in specific niche and all, will be able to get more listeners. So do you think it's right? Do you think it will happen, like the podcasters who are small and medium, will they be able to push up in the hosting platforms?
I honestly don't think it's going to change much. I don't think that, and I'm probably speaking more to my type of podcasting client as opposed to, the general entertainment podcaster. Look, if you're a comedian and you've been sitting at second, third, fourth behind Joe Rogan in the Apple rankings, sure, Joe Rogan leaving that platform is going to give you the chance to rise up a little bit. But for most podcasters, at least the folks that I work with, they're not concerned about the Joe Rogans of the world. They're not concerned about the New York Times, the NPRs, the Daily of the world. They're not in it to be the top podcasting name. They're in it for a lot of different reasons, and that has zero impact on them, right? Like, they're in it because they want to grow their brand reputation. And so they're speaking to their potential audience and their potential clients. And sure, some of those clients probably also listen to Joe Rogan, but those clients aren't going to stop listening because Joe Rogan left the platform. Or they're doing it for networking opportunities. I know plenty of podcasters who don't care if they get 5 listeners, because the podcast itself has given them an opportunity to talk to so many interesting people, potential clients, potential partners, people that they admire. And so it doesn't matter how many people get to listen to their show. They still have this platform to do what they want to do. So, I think in one sense, Joe Rogan helps a little bit, because being on Spotify, they're going to push him heavily. People who use that platform purely for music listening are going to get more and more hints and ads and pushes to check out spoken word content. And maybe by virtue of the fact that they check out Joe Rogan for the first time, they think, I wonder if there's other spoken word content on this platform that I should check out. So I think in that sense it could help people, but I don't really think this has a huge impact on the majority of the podcasters out there, and probably the ones who are listening to a show like this that are thinking about how they're going to use this podcast to better themselves.
Yeah, I mean, like, you're actually right, because people sometimes they don't care about the listens more than the interviewing the potential clients. Because there's a guy called Scott Carson who actually I interviewed him previously. I think you might not know him from one of the podcasting groups. So I was watching his YouTube videos and all, and the number of views that he has on YouTube in some of the like videos, like 100 or 200 or 35, something like that. But he established around like 600 episodes, and he actually got a lot of clients from the the podcasting community itself. So yeah, I think that's one of the things that pretty much podcasters should keep into account. So
Well, and I
one
think
final,
just to that point, I just want to say,
yeah,
know why you're podcasting, right? Joe Rogan, his podcast is to sell the audience, right?
Yeah.
As far as we're concerned, Joe Rogan is a mattress salesman. He's a stamps.com salesman, right? Like his thing is to build as large of an audience as possible and sell against that audience. And so, yeah, a lot of podcasters think, well, if I can get 100 million people listening, then I'll do well. But the truth is there are people who can be really, really successful with 100 listeners, 200 listeners, because their goals are clearly defined and this platform helps them reach their goals, right? If you're a consultant, if you're a financial advisor, if you're selling a product and that product, you know, when you reach 100 people, 10 people sign up, who knows? Like that might be your best year of sales ever. So I think you have to really know why you're doing this, what your goals are, who your audience is, what you want them to do when they're done listening to that podcast, and think about that. If your whole thing is, I just want a podcast so that I can get advertisers, it's a really, really tough job. Most people who excel at that are good at building audiences no matter what platform they're on, and they're not, you know, it's not an inherent trait. Not everybody is good. Even those who are good, not everybody is going to strike gold, right? It's like everybody thinks they're going to be an actor. Well, I went to acting school, and I know this, and I know this, and I know this. Well, that doesn't mean you're going to be Tom Cruise, right? There's one Tom Cruise, there's one Will Smith, there's one Denzel Washington, and there are thousands and thousands of people, some of who are probably even more talented, who just don't get that break and just don't get that chance. So, you know, if that's what you want to do, great, go for it, be passionate, do it. But for the majority of people that are using this platform, think about why you're doing it and focus on your goals, and you'll be way more successful.
Wow, that's totally good. I'm sure my listeners will take that into great account. So the one thing before, you know, going on to the last question is that everyone knows that this pandemic actually affected the podcasters really a lot. So we have talked a lot about like, you know, how to increase the audience and all. But my question is, how should podcasters prepare for the next pandemic? Because it's not obvious, it's very obvious, because once in 10 years or once in 20 years or 30 years, somewhere around that, something like this will definitely happen. You know, it may either be a natural calamity, it's a virus in this case, it may be a natural calamity, because, you know, one of my, you know, in my state, there's a meme page, okay, like really he actually posted like, what, the 2020 is going to be really awesome. The virus came, then next locust, you know, in my country, actually the locust are actually migrating right now. The locust came, next the aliens might come, zombies might come, who knows? So, you know, that's what of the, you know, the possibilities that people are thinking right now in this 2020. So assuming that next, you know, half of the next 2020 is going to be, you know, kind of like a recovery from what we have done so far, how should actually broadcasters prepare for the next next pandemic?
I think what you have to do is you have to meet the moment. Nobody saw, like you said, nobody really saw this pandemic coming. And overall podcast listening dropped at the onset of the pandemic, and for good reason. Less people were driving in cars, less people were going to work, and truthfully, less people had time alone. Even me personally, I don't listen to 75% of the podcasting that I would normally listen to, because I don't have that alone time that I used to have, because my wife is home, my kids are home, I'm doing more, like it doesn't happen. So things change. But I have had several clients who have seen huge spikes in their own numbers. And the reason why is they met the moment. And in this case, the moment was there was confusion, there was angst, there was fear, there was uncertainty. And so those podcasters who were able to fill that void, right? Those who could come in and talk about what this means for the markets, what this means for small businesses, what this means medically, what this means for your health, right? Like those folks who took advantage of the moment and realized what the audience needed were able to really, really do a great job. And that might mean that maybe spoken word, maybe the podcast medium is not the right moment, right? Because we are not commuting and we're not spending as much time alone. Maybe that means you should be focusing more on video, right? Like we're doing right now, because a lot of people are sitting at their computers, they're watching YouTube, they're streaming Netflix, right? Like you have to meet the moment. So I really, and I'm sort of guilty of this myself being the podcast consultant, but you really have to be more than just a podcaster. right?
Yeah.
There are, for example, there are people who are really, really good at radio. And to them, they're radio DJs. That's it. They just think of themselves as being a radio personality. Those people are struggling because radio is struggling. But then there are people who use radio as a way to, reach the audience for what their function is. So, maybe you're someone who likes to talk about sports and comment on sports. Well, that doesn't mean you have to do it on radio. Maybe you went from talking about sports on the radio to talking about sports on a podcast. Maybe now with more video content, you're talking about sports on a podcast, and now you're including video. Maybe you've realized that my audience is younger and wants things shorter, so I still talk about sports, but now I'm doing it on TikTok or Snapchat or whatever. So I don't think you should be caught up in the technology and the delivery platform and things like that. You have to be focused on your mission, and your mission has to be able to meet the needs of the day. There's this great example. I always forget what the company is, but there was a company who they started off as, Stagecoach, right? And all they did was transport people on stagecoaches. Well, eventually the car came along and they went out of business. But there was another business that used stagecoaches, but they thought of themselves as transportation. So when the car came along, they said, well, we'll just use a car for transportation. And then when the train came along, they said, well, we'll use the train for transportation. And then, so their mission was beyond the delivery. Their mission was, they had an abstract mission that made it easier to pivot how they accomplished that mission. So like my clients, if you're a financial advisor and your mission is to raise awareness for your products or services, right now a podcast could be a great way to do that. But in 5 years from now, if you still get stuck thinking, well, I'm a podcaster and fight against like if you think your mission is to be a podcaster and not to get more clients, you're not going to be able to pivot and adapt to what the moment needs. So maybe the next pandemic, I don't know, doesn't come with the financial collapse that we had. Maybe for some reason it's a weird superbug that infects us all with money, right? Money's raining down from the trees as a result of this latest pandemic. And so, how do you meet that moment? How do you turn your strengths, your skills into something that fills that void that is necessary? There are people who just complain about things happening and think, oh, all of this is happening to me. And there are people who take this, look at it, analyze it, pivot, and figure out, how do I adjust? And if you can adjust, you're going to be great.
Wow. And of course it takes time a little bit, because sometimes people think that just all of a sudden it should happen. So it takes time as well. So that's something that really had to take into account. So that's really great. Just one question before closing is that what do you actually think the best tip that you can give to a fellow podcaster in order to grow according to you? The best tip in the world.
It is so corny when I say this, but I mean it succinct. I mean it so well. If you aren't willing to do this for just one person, this is really for those people who just love to talk, love to be behind a microphone. If you're not willing to record this podcast knowing you might only have one listener, meaning if you're not so passionate, so educated, so curious, whatever drives you to this microphone, if the only thing driving you here is to get an audience, you're probably going to struggle. But if you're driven to do this regardless of how big your audience is, you're probably going to succeed because you're going to do it with passion, with authenticity, with enthusiasm, and you're going to do it with a smile on your face. And nobody wants to listen to a podcaster that doesn't want to be there, right? Like, you don't have to podcast. It's great to have one, but you don't have to do it just for the sake of doing it. So if you don't want to do it, don't do it. You're not going to help yourself.
Yeah, I can totally agree on that, because my main motto is kind of like passion is something that really drives me, because kind of actually helped me, get out of three suicide commitments. Because in my previous, stages, I was like totally depressed. My young self, it was like totally was really bad stuff. And the one thing actually kept me going was my passion for. I just wanted to help people, like, to grow something. I don't know, the word brand actually came to me after my studying my MBA, but still I just wanted to help people to grow something. Like, they should get better in their lives. I should be a part of, like, something more than myself. That's one of the things that actually helped me to get to this place, man. Now I'm not really a big guy or anything like that, but still I know, like, recently a fellow podcaster, like, he's just starting out. He actually texted me that, please have a review of my podcast. And I felt like, oh my god, someone is sending me a podcast to review that podcast. I'm like, I'm not a big podcaster, but still I have some, like, advices, like, regarding the cover arts and descriptions, because I've done, like, I've interviewed like 50 guests so far, so I just know little bit about what to do and not. So yeah, I think that's really a big thing in order to do that.
You know what? You bring up a great point, which is the next. You only asked for one. I'm going to give you a second tip, though. Every listener counts, right?
Yeah.
So if somebody emails you and says thank you, if somebody emails you and asks for your help, if you can show some empathy, and if you could treat each one of those people like they are the most important person in the world, you will make a fan for life. And the best thing about fans is they'll advocate for you, right?
Yeah.
Most people do not discover a podcast because it was ranked number one in iTunes, or because some bot suggested, hey, you listen to this, maybe you should try this. Most of the time we listen to a podcast because someone we know, love, and trust turns to you and says, oh, I listen to so and so, you should check it out. And so if you can turn your listeners into that person for your show, you've just turned on a marketing engine that you can't shut off. It's great.
Yeah, I totally agree on that. So, is there anything you want to ask me in order to anything else?
No, I just, I think this has been a great conversation. I really hope this is helpful for your audience. And, like I said, just do it with a smile. You can't go wrong.
Oh, well, that's what it is, guys. So, you heard him, and we have discussed a lot of things in this podcast, like what to do, because how to prepare for the next pandemic, if there's anything like regarding this virus or anything like that, and how Joe Rogan going on Spotify actually affected us, and how to become a podcast consultant, and many other stuff. I'll leave the timestamps in the description below so that you can easily find out. And thank you so much, Mr. Matthew, for coming out to the podcast. It really means a lot. So I'm sorry for hanging you out back in the days. So really apologize for that.
These are crazy times. It is absolutely okay, and it was absolutely my pleasure.
Thanks so much, man. And thanks so much, guys, for listening. So if you have any questions, leave in the comment section below. I'll definitely happy to answer that. And I'll see you guys next podcast.